Monday. Welcome into College Football Live. Chris Budden here, along with Greg McElroy and Emmanuel Acho. And let's just say no one here had a better weekend than McElroy. But we'll get to that a little later in the show. First, let's start with our favorite topic, social media. On Friday, Jason Witten wrote an article for ESPN.com about how social media has become locker room poison, saying, quote, these days many players will react to a summary or clip taken out of context about everything that is said about them by a teammate or coach. That can lead to a grudge and a divided locker room. Too many times I've seen struggling players reply to criticism from an anonymous egg with 20 followers, amplifying the situation by introducing it to the Twitterverse. He went on to say, gone are the days where you go and you call your mom when you get into the locker room. Now you just go and you look at all your mentions. So, Emmanuel, we'll start with you. How have you seen social media change a locker room?
So first and foremost, I covered the Cowboys a little bit last year, and there's a reason he was called Old Man Witt. Now, with that being said, he was also called Gold Jacket Witt, so he's one of the best to ever play at that position. But social media, there are pros and there are cons. I get what he's saying. It can totally be a distraction if the player allows it to be a distraction. Personally, I don't know about you, Greg, but I don't respond to the egg icons. But besides that, I see what he's saying, but ultimately, let the players use it as long as you don't get distracted.
Well, I for one, am a millennial, and whether you take that as a positive or a negative, I look at it and I do think that some people become so inundated with what's going on, a little 6-inch screen, that they kind of lose focus of what's around you. Part of being a football team is the interaction and the camaraderie, and most notably the interaction in the locker room. There's no greater team sport in the entire world. And if you're so focused on what the outside world thinks about you via your mentions or your likes or your posts or your retweets, then you can kind of lose track of the relationships that you can create with some of your teammates. So I think social media in most cases is actually a bad thing when it comes to the relationship building that's required to put together a fantastic team.
No, I think you're exactly right, especially when it comes to college kids. When you're talking about pros, they're being paid, and you would hope that a 21, 22-year-old would be a little bit more mature. But let's talk about the college level. I've seen kids at programs like Texas get in trouble for tweeting mid-game. What are we doing? At the end of the day, you have a job to do. There have been players that are tweeting mid-game, players tweeting post-games. Even last week, there was a discrepancy at a big-time program between a player ragging on his college coach. So, yes, if you can't be mature enough to use it wisely, don't use it at all.
And honestly, too, E-Man, you look at it, and I was a guy that was starting at quarterback right in the boom of the Twitter era. It launched in, 2008? I joined it in 2009. And I remember vividly a 4-game stretch during my junior season in which I was struggling. And they always say, everyone's like, oh, yeah, I don't read the press clippings. I don't care what anyone else is saying about me. That's a lie. Everyone is very aware, and especially at 21 years old, you're a little bit more sensitive than you probably should be to people that you don't know's opinion of what it is that you're doing. It affected me. It affected me negatively, and I took it to the practice field every day feeling bad about what I did the day before and the day before that and the game before that. So I personally, as someone that was right there in the beginning of the Twitter era and playing, it definitely had an effect on me, and certainly not for the positive, because I did read the positive press clippings. Those don't stick with you as long as the negative ones, the ones that they're very critical of your performance.
No, I remember one thing my coach told me, Will Muschamp. He was my linebacker coach, now the head coach at South Carolina. He said, if you listen to the fans, sooner or later you will be sitting with them. That's the one thing that stuck with me. Like you said, Greg, they can sing your praises 9 times, but that one time they comment on your interception or they comment on your missed tackle in the open field, that's what sticks with you, and that's what you let haunt you, and ultimately that does infect and poison the team.
But, guys, also some of these old tweets.
One thing that I did here, though, one thing that I did like, and Ryan Leaf actually said that, someone else's opinion of me is none of my business. But it's really difficult to disassociate what someone says on Twitter versus what someone might say to you in real life.
That's true, but also we've seen some of these old tweets have come back to haunt, especially in Major League Baseball over the weekend when you have the Braves' Sean Newcomb and Trey Turner with the Nationals. I mean, Greg, for you, how do you, as a college football coach, how do you begin to manage your players and recruits, especially when some of these tweets are 4, 5, 6 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole nother level of its own. That's its own issue. And if you have immaturity and you do stupid things as a teenager, it's a good lesson to learn. It can be held against you down the road. And if you're a vile human being and it comes forth on the internet, then people will find out exactly what it is you're all about. But I look at it and I think that Twitter can be used as a real positive as well. I don't think you should react. I think if in a perfect world, all college football players would have all their mentions turned off. Like, you can learn things, you can get news, you can get information, but turning off your mentions, turning off what people are saying about you would, I think, be beneficial. And that was the conversation that I had with Nick Saban heading into 2010. He said, no Twitter during the season. I said, yes, sir, sounds good. Let's go. And that was kind of how it went. So it was a zero-tolerance policy at that point. Clearly, things have shifted a bit. But I think every coach needs to have a very open conversation with his team as to what he can and can't do throughout the course of the season on Twitter.
You talk about a shift, G-Mac. Let's shift the conversation a little bit. Talk about the positives. When I go to a lot of these recruits' Twitter pages, the first thing you see is their huddle account, their highlight video. Back in the day, you used to have to go to a football camp to get noticed. That's how I got noticed, going to a USC football camp. Now you can literally get noticed by Twitter alone. So there are a lot of negatives, but when you talk about some of the positives, I learned a lot about these high school recruits just off their Twitter, off their highlight clips, which otherwise outside of Twitter, that kind of stuff wouldn't exist. So I think we also have to know we got to shift with the times as well.
Yeah, but come on, E-Man. If you're going to watch a highlight video, a 40-second highlight video on a guy on Twitter, are you really going to know whether or not this guy can play? I mean, anyone can look good in 40 seconds in a highlight video. My goodness. I do think that it does increase the sense of entitlement, though, for recruits. They're constantly being told by all the people around them, their high school coaches, their families, their principals, their classmates. They're always being told how great they are. Now you add in thousands upon thousands of people on Twitter telling them how great they are. So when they get on campus, the de-recruitment phase that everyone has to go through, I think it's a little bit more significant and a lot tougher to deal with because of all the positive praise that surrounds these great players coming out of high school and heading into the college situation.
Yeah, and you're right. The one thing I know and that has really poisoned a lot of big-time programs, the coaches get so used to singing these players' praises on Twitter, messaging them, liking their tweets, retweeting them, and then you get to college and all of a sudden you have to humble the kid that you just spent the last 2 years building up. So it's a real tough dichotomy. I'm just thankful I don't have to navigate it.
Yeah, no one's going to tell Emmanuel that he can't do the selfies, right, guys? Lover of the selfie. You guys are right, though. I mean, there are a lot of positives to it, especially for the coaches and the programs when they can tweet out, hey, look at our new uniforms and, you know, look at our new campus and all the stuff that we've got. I mean, kids want to do that stuff. They like to see the cool things, including ESPN 300 recruit Cardell Thomas, who told TomahawkNation.com after his recent visit to FSU, the first time I came here, it was so boring. No disrespect to the last staff, but it was like so boring. I was like, I'm never coming back here again. Coach kept telling me it was different, and then I finally came to see what he means. So guys, has there been a change in the guard? Greg, we'll start with you. Is there a move towards these newer, younger, cooler coaches?
I don't think so. Maybe it just depends on the player, because I look at Georgia and Kirby Smart's anything but cool, and he's anything but a player's coach. He's a disciplinarian, he's a Saban disciple, and yet I look every single day and they have a new 5-star that's recruited, that's been recruited by them and is committing. So I think it just depends on the player, and that's the beauty of college football. It's what you're into. If you want to go to a place that is going to have putt-putt and great music at practice, and you want to have fun in the week leading up to the game, then you can go to places like Florida State or Clemson or some of those other places. If you want to go to a place that is going to be all about winning, all about X's and O's, all about trying to define what the values of the organization are, there's places like that for you, like Alabama, like Texas A&M, like Georgia. So I think there's something for everybody. It just depends on the player and what they really want out of their college experience.
Yeah, I think it's twofold, right? Again, one of my coaches, the thing he said that stuck with me the longest, he said, the fun is in winning. He said the fun is in winning.
Yeah.
Florida State last year, they struggled. So when you're talking about Florida State's coach last year, they struggled first and foremost. Then Jimbo Fisher, 52-year-old man. You bring in Willie Taggart, he's 41. So if you're talking about a coach that may be a little further removed from the times, he better have a great recruiting coordinator in there that's a little more hip, a little more swaggy, something the teenage kids can relate to. But ultimately, like Greg said, the fun is in winning. So if you are Alabama, if you are Georgia, and you're going 14-0 or 13-0, you really don't have to recruit too much. I would just show them the record.
Being a player's coach is a wonderful thing, and I would like to think, and I bet you would too, E-Man, hey, if I got into this business, I'd like to be a player's coach. It just seems more fun. But then again, you also have to be very careful about giving the players a little bit too much length in that leash. You look at Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M, had so many great recruits. Seldom, though, did those recruits reach their potential under his leadership, and that team often underachieved because sometimes, and a lot of people assume, that he allowed the players to get away with too much. I think there's a great way to manage it, but being a player's coach, it might definitely help you when it comes to recruiting, but as far as running the program, it might not always have its advantages.
Hey, speaking of coaches who want to be cool and hip, who else other than Dan Mullen do you think of? You know, he's wearing the Yeezys and the Jordans, and now he's taking pictures with his players, pointing at their grills. Although, Coach, I don't think you got a grill.
Yeah. Not a great look, Coach. I mean, I don't really consider Dan Mullen like super hip. Maybe fashion forward with the shoes and the grill game, but I don't know. Hip and Dan Mullen, they don't coincide, man.
Here's what I wonder. Does Dan Mullen know what Dan Mullen is doing right there? Like, I'm not convinced he knows exactly what's going on. It's like, okay, do I put it right here on my molars, or I'm all the way confused?
He probably thought, I hope that picture never makes the light of day. Sorry about it, Coach. Well, coming up, we'll chat Pac-12 South and which freshman is the heir apparent to Sam Darnold. We'll chat next.
College Football Live is brought to you by State Farm. Talk to an agent today at 800 State Farm.
We don't talk about winning the championship game. We talk about surviving so that you can have a chance to win the Pac-12 championship.
If we can continue on the trajectory that we feel we're on and take another big step forward with the offense, I think we've got a chance to be pretty competitive.
We just got to find a way of figuring out who our playmakers are because we are such a young team. There's a lot of guys that may play for us on September 1st that weren't with us in the springtime.
You know, I say this all the time. Not only Jake, but our seniors. Those are the guys that I'm looking for. If Miles Gaskin and Caleb McGarry and those guys can take the next step in their game, we'll have something going.
As you heard it at Media Days last week, the Pac-12's hungry to return to the field after just a 1-8 showing during bowl season last year. Just a month away, there are some interesting non-conference matchups in Week 1, including two likely top 10 teams going head-to-head in Washington against Auburn out of the SEC. So let's do a little fun on the clock with the Pac-12. And as we said, that's an interesting Week 1 matchup between Auburn and Washington. Greg, could be make it or break it for the Pac-12 to get into the playoffs. So who are you taking, Washington or the field?
Give me Washington. I think the Pac-12, top to bottom, is actually quite solid. But Washington's in a league of their own. Their front seven on defense. I know they miss Vita Vea. That's fine. Greg Gaines will fill that void. At linebacker, they're as good as anybody. In the secondary, they're outstanding. On offense, the entire offensive line returns. You got to find some wide receivers. That's fine. Not too worried about that. You got a senior quarterback, and you have a dynamic 1-2 punch at running back with Myles Gaskin and Savon Ahmed. Washington, with their field and their personnel, they got a real chance to be a really good team this year.
Give me the field, but here's why. Washington has to take on a huge punch in Auburn Week 1. If they can absorb that blow and keep it pushing, they have a chance. But remember last year, Florida State, they played Alabama. It did not look good the rest of the season.
Well, you'll go first this time, E-Man, because Greg took too much time. So let's move on. USC will have to find the heir apparent to Sam Darnold this season. And it is a three-man race between three freshmen, JT Daniels, Matt Fink, and Jack Sears. So, E-Man, who will be the Trojans' quarterback this season?
Look, it better not be a race. If I'm JT Daniels, I better get the starting job when I step on campus. Here's why. I forfeited my senior year. I doubled up my junior year, my class load. I've broken all the records. I'm the player of the year. Like, what else do I have to do to earn the job? Yes, a lot will come down to camp, but I've already sacrificed a ton. I got my eyes set on JT Daniels.
I'm with you, E-Man. I think it's JT Daniels' show for sure. You don't graduate early unless the coaches are telling you something. They don't need him to get on campus if they like one of their guys that's already there. So I think it's going to be JT Daniels. He's an accomplished high school player, but you also look at the personnel around JT Daniels. The offensive line returns mostly intact. A bunch of wide receivers are back that are rock solid, and I think they have a very underrated running back in Stephen Carr.
E-Man sold me. It's like a political campaign. You guys are great. So final one, we'll start with Greg. A lot of new faces in the Pac-12 South this year. Coaches Chip Kelly, Kevin Sumlin, Herm Edwards. Which new coach will find success first? Greg, you're on the clock.
I'm going to go with Arizona. I'm going to go with Kevin Sumlin. I look at what Kevin Sumlin did at Texas A&M when he inherited a quarterback, and that's exactly what he has out there in Tucson. Khalil Tate is one of the best quarterbacks, most explosive quarterbacks in all of college football. And the uncertainty that surrounds the rest of the Pac-12 South programs makes me think that Kevin Sumlin could step into what is a pretty good first season there at Arizona.
I swear by the end of the season, y'all are going to think I'm on UCLA's payroll. I got to go with Chip Kelly. He's so innovative. He's so bright on the offensive side of the ball. They do have a lot of question marks. I get that. But in college, scheme can beat talent, and Chip's scheme is unparalleled.
Everyone loves to talk about Chip Kelly.
What?
Well, close up. You got a comment,
like
Greg?
No, I just. Who's their quarterback? They're terrible on defense. Like, there's so many questions about you. Their schedule's impossible. Come on, E-Man.
Where's my gavel? We got to move on. It's my gavel. We got to move on to something Greg was talking about over the weekend. Oh, so close to glory. Who are the best teams to not win a championship?
There's my boy.
We'll have more on that. SportsCenter at 6 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. After PTI with Sage and Kevin, they'll have Rachel Nichols' exclusive interview with LeBron in reaction to his most important comments and the latest MLB trade deadline news. SportsCenter, 6 Eastern on ESPN and the ESPN app. Welcome back. To celebrate 20 years since the formation of the BCS, ESPN Analytics calculated overall offensive and defensive ratings to find the true strength of a champion in the BCS CFP era. The model determined the 2005 Longhorns are the top champion in the last 20 seasons. So, E-Man, I'm going to go out on a limb. You agree with that?
Look, no words, just one action. Okay, I do agree with that. Why? Because of Vince Young. If you're looking at a team from top to bottom, I'll go the 0-1 Hurricanes. I mean, their talent was on par with nothing we've ever seen in college football. But when you talk about having a generational player, which Vince Young was, that brings that 05 Texas team to the top of the rankings. And of course, I was a Longhorn. What do you expect?
First of all, it's the worst list I've ever seen in my life. The difference between the 05 Texas Longhorns and the 2010 Auburn Tigers is almost nothing. They had an elite game-changing quarterback, Vince Young, Cam Newton. You have a great defensive player, Michael Huff at Texas, Nick Fairley at Auburn. Like, they're the same team, and yet Texas is at number 1. Auburn in 2010 at number 15. It's ridiculous. The list is a joke because 2001 Miami is the greatest champion we've ever seen, and it's really not even close. Just go down the list, go down the roster, 38 players that eventually played in the NFL that was on that 85-man scholarship list. Amazing group of talented players there in Miami.
Since you have your own opinions, we'll get to something you posed on Twitter since you are the end-all, be-all of college football history. So you brought up this conversation over the weekend. Who are the best teams that didn't win the title? Greg, since it was your conversation, which, by the way, I don't even want to go through your mentions and how long this took. Who is your top team to not win the title?
Well, the amount of mentions we got there was unbelievable. I saw everything from 2013 Michigan State all over the map. But I think it's still the 2002 Miami Hurricanes, who you could say was maybe just as good as the 2001. Just one phantom pass interference in the end zone against Ohio State away from winning consecutive national championships. Now, Ohio State was a great team as well. You got to give them a tremendous amount of credit. And they didn't throw the flag. They shouldn't be blamed for it. They were a deserving champion. But that Miami team in 2002 was off the charts good with talent loaded throughout the roster and many, many players that returned from that 01 championship team. So I'd have to go with 2002 Miami and a photo finish over a couple other very worthy contenders.
You know, I would go with the low-hanging fruit of 05 SC, but because of all this Texas slander G-Mac just put all over my face just now, I'm going with the 08 Texas Longhorns. Here's why. They went to the championship in 09 with a lesser talented team, and yes, Greg, we lost to you against Alabama. I get that. But in 08,
I wasn't going to bring it up.
He was the winningest quarterback of all time. They had Brian Orakpo at the edge. They had a future Hall of Famer in Earl Thomas at safety. Colt was the winningest quarterback in a 70% completion percentage. That 08 team was lights out. Remember, three-way tie, Oklahoma and Texas Tech. Oklahoma ended up going to the national championship and losing to Florida. But if Texas goes, I think Texas wins that game. So for me, I got to say the 2008 Texas Longhorns. And I don't want to hear nothing else from you, Greg.
That's fine. You got it. You can have it. That's yours. You can have it. I'll give you the 2008 Texas Long. That was a great team. By the way, Michael Crabtree says hello and wreck 'em. All right, let's go.
Okay, mine would be 2014. Whoa, you guys had your time. Mine would be 2014 TCU because they went 12-1. Their one loss was in the regular season at Baylor. They lost by 3. Then they went on to stomp Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl, a team that also beat Alabama this year. So TCU would be mine from 2014.
I like that pick.
Yeah, thanks.
Good one.
Greg
I
has
like
nothing
it.
to say now. No, you got nothing? Okay.
That's
Well,
it.
we have more about Greg coming up because watch out, Tiger Woods, y'all. Someone on the screen, oh, it's Greg, hit the first hole-in-one this weekend, and we have the proof, or maybe not proof, coming up next.